In this video, we are going to be breaking down SpongeBob Specials lore through an adult lens. Let's get started with the illusion of innocence. You remember how it felt the first time you watched SpongeBob on a Saturday morning. The colors were loud, the jokes were simple, and everything felt safe. Not safe in a thoughtful way, but safe in the way background noise feels safe when you are too young to question it. Bikini Bottom presented itself as a place where nothing truly bad could happen. Problems appeared, but they never stayed. Pain showed up, but it was always followed by laughter. And that pattern mattered more than it seemed. Bikini Bottom is not chaotic by accident. It is controlled chaos, repeated so often that it begins to feel normal. When something goes wrong, the world does not stop to process it. It resets. The laughter arrives on time, like a sedative. Bright colors move your attention away from instability the same way a toy distracts a crying child. This is not innocence. This is conditioning. As a kid, you laughed because the show told you to laugh. As an adult, you start to notice how often discomfort is immediately covered up. Someone is hurt, embarrassed, or displaced, and before your mind can sit with it, the moment is reframed as a joke. That is not healing. That is avoidance dressed up as fun. It teaches a quiet lesson that feelings are only acceptable if they are short-lived and entertaining. Bikini Bottom functions like a false safe space. It looks harmless, sounds cheerful, and moves quickly enough that you never stay in one emotion for too long. But safety without stability is not safety at all. It is a liminal space where nothing resolves and nothing grows. The environment trains you to accept disorder as long as it is colorful and familiar. This is where the illusion becomes unsettling. Either Bikini Bottom is innocent, or it is carefully designed to normalize dysfunction. Both cannot exist at the same time. If it were truly innocent, chaos would be rare. Instead, chaos is routine. If it were truly safe, pain would matter. Instead, pain is temporary and disposable. The logic trap is quiet, but it is there. You might recognize this feeling now as an adult. The way work stress is masked with jokes. The way burnout is softened with memes. The way exhaustion is reframed as humor so no one has to address it. SpongeBob did not invent this pattern, but it rehearsed it early when your brain was still learning what normal felt like. The laughter in Bikini Bottom is constant, but it is not reassuring. It is performative. It fills the silence so nothing heavier can settle in. That is why the world feels busy but empty, loud but emotionally flat. The show keeps moving so you never have to ask why things are the way they are. Because innocence does not disappear on its own. It is replaced. And in Bikini Bottom, what replaces it is something much quieter, much brighter, and much more exhausting. SpongeBob's happiness. You were taught to see SpongeBob as cheerful, but that word is too soft for what is actually happening. Cheerfulness suggests ease. What SpongeBob displays is effort. His smile arrives on time, every time, even when the situation does not call for it, especially when it does not call for it. That is the first clue. This optimism is not spontaneous. It is practiced. Watch how often SpongeBob laughs after humiliation. Not before, not during, after. The moment something painful lands, the laughter follows immediately, like a reflex drilled into the body. It is not joy rising up. It is a response shutting something down. In real life, that pattern has a name. It is a coping mechanism designed to survive environments where sadness is inconvenient. SpongeBob does not just stay positive. He overcorrects. He reframes cruelty as friendship. He reframes neglect as opportunity. He reframes exploitation as passion. Each reframe is delivered with enthusiasm, but the enthusiasm feels rehearsed. Like a line read so many times it no longer needs to be believed. This is not happiness as a feeling. This is happiness as a performance. You recognize this if you have ever smiled through burnout. If you have ever joked about being overwhelmed because it felt safer than admitting you were drowning. Forced optimism is not about being strong. It is about being acceptable. In Bikini Bottom, sadness does not stop the system. It slows it down. So SpongeBob removes it before it can become a problem. There is a quiet lesson embedded here. Either SpongeBob is genuinely happy in situations that would break most people, or he has learned that visible distress leads nowhere. Both cannot be true at the same time. If he were truly content, his optimism would not need to be so loud. If he were allowed to be unhappy, his laughter would not need to arrive so fast. This is where the tone shifts from funny to unsettling. SpongeBob never asked for rest. He never asked for space. He never asked to be taken seriously when he is hurt. Instead, he doubles down on cheer, as if positivity itself might earn him safety. That is not confidence. That is survival behavior. The show rewards this. Every time SpongeBob smiles through discomfort, the world keeps moving. Conflict dissolves. Authority figures remain comfortable. Nothing has to change. His optimism becomes a stabilizing force for everyone else, even as it erases his own internal experience. For a generation raised on Saturday morning cartoons and VHS tapes that played until the tracking wore out, this felt normal. Bright energy meant things were okay. Silence meant something was wrong. So SpongeBob learned to fill every quiet moment with enthusiasm. And you learn to do the same. This is why his happiness feels endless and empty at the same time. It is not replenished, it is spent. Over and over again. A smile used like armor eventually stops protecting what is underneath. So, when you ask why SpongeBob never seems to grow, never slows down, never breaks, the answer is simple and uncomfortable. He cannot afford to. In a world that ignores pain unless it is entertaining, happiness is not a trait. It is a requirement. And SpongeBob meets it every time, even when it costs him something you were never meant to notice. What if happiness was not his personality, but his armor? And what if the place he lives in is the reason that armor is never allowed to come off? Bikini Bottom presents itself as a town, but it behaves like a system. Not a community that grows, but an environment that maintains itself. People do not arrive from the outside, and they do not truly leave. They circle, they return, they reset. Every episode begins where the last one ended, not because the story is unfinished, but because the world is designed to stay exactly as it is. You remember this feeling without realizing it. The way episodes ended and somehow nothing carried over. Big moments happened, disasters unfolded, emotional confrontations surfaced, and then the next time you tuned in, everything was fine again. Not healed, not resolved, fine. The difference matters. In a healthy world, events leave marks, lessons stick, consequences accumulate. In Bikini Bottom, they dissolve. The system absorbs them and returns to baseline. This is not narrative laziness, it is structural confinement. A closed loop where growth would be a malfunction. Think about how rarely anyone changes. SpongeBob does not advance. Squidward does not escape. Patrick does not improve. Even when something seems to shift, it quietly snaps back into place. Like a screensaver resetting the moment you touch the mouse. The illusion of motion without actual progress. This is what makes Bikini Bottom feel strangely calm and strangely empty at the same time. Nothing bad lasts, but nothing good evolves either. It is a liminal space suspended between moments where time moves forward but meaning does not. That can feel comforting when you are young. Nothing you do can permanently break the world. But it becomes unsettling when you notice that nothing you do can change it either. Either Bikini Bottom is a place where people grow, or it is a place where people are preserved. Both cannot exist together. Growth requires discomfort that stays. Preservation requires discomfort that disappears. Bikini Bottom chooses preservation every time. This explains why escape never feels real. Characters talk about leaving, dream about something more, imagine a different life, and then remain exactly where they started. The system allows the fantasy of escape because the fantasy does not threaten the loop. Actual departure would. As an adult, this starts to feel familiar. The job that resets every Monday. The routines that blur weeks together. The feeling that you are busy but not moving. Bikini Bottom mirrors that experience perfectly. It is not a place designed to harm you. It is a place designed to keep you functional. The repetition is soothing by design. Predictability lowers anxiety. The same streets, the same voices, the same outcomes. Your brain learns there are no lasting surprises here. That is why it feels safe enough to fall asleep to. The world tucks itself in by refusing to change. But safety without growth comes at a cost. Nothing heals in a system that cannot remember. Nothing improves in a place that must return to normal at all costs. The loop is gentle, but it is absolute. You are not meant to feel alarmed by this realization, just aware of it. Bikini Bottom is not a journey. It is a container. It holds its characters exactly where they are, indefinitely, like figures on a shelf that look alive as long as you do not ask them to move forward. A place that never changes does not heal. It preserves. And inside that preserved world, there is one location that never closes, never rests, and never questions itself: the Krusty Krab. As a kid, you were told this was a happy workplace, a dream job. SpongeBob wakes up excited, runs to work, sings about it. That framing matters because it teaches you early that loving your job is proof that the system is working. But look closer, slowly, without judgment. SpongeBob does not just enjoy his job, he clings to it. The Krusty Krab is not where SpongeBob works, it is where SpongeBob exists. His identity collapses into his uniform. When he is praised, it is for productivity. When he is noticed, it is for labor. When he feels valued, it is because he performed correctly. This is not passion. This is dependence dressed up as enthusiasm. Watch how often SpongeBob chooses work over rest, over safety, over dignity. He shows up sick. He works through pain. He apologizes for problems he did not cause. Each time, it is framed as loyalty, and loyalty is rewarded with more work. Not care, not protection, just continuation. This is how economic conditioning works when it's done gently. No one has to threaten SpongeBob. No one has to yell. The system simply teaches him that his worth exists inside the job. Outside of it, he disappears. That lesson sinks in quietly, repeated day after day until it feels natural. Mr. Krabs does not need to be a villain for this to function. In fact, the system works better when he is funny. When exploitation comes with jokes, it feels lighter. When underpayment is treated as humor, it feels tolerable. When exhaustion is laughed through, it stops looking like a problem and starts looking like dedication. Either SpongeBob loves his job or he fears losing the only place where he feels necessary. Both cannot be true at the same time. Love does not require self-erasure, fear does. And SpongeBob erases himself daily, happily, loudly, without complaint. You recognize this pattern if you have ever answered emails after midnight and told yourself it was fine. If you have ever worn exhaustion like a badge. If you have ever felt guilty for resting. The Krusty Krab teaches that lesson early. Work first, feelings later, identity last. The most unsettling part is how normal it all feels. The Krusty Krab is not portrayed as abusive. It is portrayed as routine, and routine is powerful. Routine teaches the nervous system what to expect. SpongeBob expects to give everything. He expects nothing back. This is not about ambition. SpongeBob never asks for growth. He asks for more shifts. He does not want advancement. He wants reassurance that he still belongs. That is the quiet trade the system offers. Give us your energy and we will let you stay. As a child, this felt inspiring. As an adult, it feels familiar. The same rhythms, the same cheerful denial, the same belief that if you just love your job enough, it will love you back. But the Krusty Krab never closes. Not because it cannot, because it does not need to. There will always be someone willing to smile through the exhaustion. Someone who mistakes survival for fulfillment. SpongeBob does not love his job. He fears losing it. And the easiest way to keep that fear from becoming visible is to cover it with laughter. Laughter in SpongeBob is not a response. It is an interruption. The moment something uncomfortable appears, a joke arrives to cut it off before it can settle. Pain does not get time to breathe. Confusion does not get time to form. Everything sharp is immediately rounded down into something harmless and loud. You notice this as a kid without understanding it. The jokes came fast. Faster than the feelings, faster than the questions. Something bad would happen, and before your body could register discomfort, the laugh track of the universe stepped in. Relief followed, but it was not relief from the problem. It was relief from having to think about the problem. This is what emotional anesthesia looks like. Not healing, not processing, just numbness delivered in bright packaging. Laughter freezes the moment, holds it still, and then lets the story move on without anything being examined. The wound is still there. It just does not hurt right now. Watch how rarely anyone sits with pain in Bikini Bottom. It flashes across the screen and disappears. Someone is humiliated, injured, rejected, or overwhelmed, and then the joke lands. The timing is precise. The system does not allow silence long enough for meaning to form. Silence is dangerous. Silence invites reflection. Laughter keeps everything moving. Either humor is used to cope with pain or it is used to avoid it. Both cannot be true at the same time. Coping requires acknowledgement. Avoidance requires speed. SpongeBob always chooses speed. This pattern becomes soothing because it is predictable. You learn that no matter how uncomfortable a moment gets, it will not last. Something funny will arrive. Something familiar will take over. That predictability lowers anxiety, even as it teaches you that discomfort is something to escape, not understand. As an adult, this starts to feel familiar in a different way. The way humor is used in meetings to soften bad news. The way jokes fill the space when someone is clearly struggling. The way sarcasm becomes a shield against burnout. Laughter becomes a pause button, not a solution. SpongeBob laughs the same way you scroll. To keep your mind occupied so it does not wander into something heavier. To stay functional, to stay acceptable, to keep the system comfortable. The repetition is important here. Joke after joke. episode after episode. The same structure replayed until it feels natural. The nervous system learns that laughter equals safety. Not because the situation is safe, but because nothing bad is allowed to linger. This is why SpongeBob feels like a fever dream when you revisit it as an adult. Everything moves too fast. Emotions start and stop abruptly. Nothing lands, nothing stays. It is a world designed to prevent depth while pretending to be light. You are not meant to feel upset by this realization, just gently aware. The laughter you once trusted was never meant to fix anything. It was meant to carry you past it. That is why this kind of content feels so easy to fall asleep to now. The rhythm is familiar. The stakes dissolve quickly. Your brain recognizes the pattern and relaxes. Nothing will demand too much from you here. Nothing will stay unresolved long enough to hurt. But that comfort comes with a trade. When laughter replaces reflection, growth is postponed. When jokes interrupt pain, healing waits its turn and never quite arrives. Laughter does not fix pain, it postpones it. And nowhere is that postponement more visible than in the way Patrick's star is treated. You were taught to see Patrick as stupid, and the word stupid makes everything easier. It turns concern into comedy. It turns neglect into a punchline. But when you slow down and really watch him, something else becomes clear. Patrick is not confused once in a while. His confusion is constant. It is persistent. It does not reset the way everything else does. If anything, it deepens. Patrick forgets things he was just told. He misunderstands basic cause and effect. He struggles to follow simple sequences. And the most important part is not that this happens. It is that no one stops it. No one corrects him gently. No one checks in. No one adapts the environment to meet him where he is. The system just laughs and moves on. In real life, when someone shows ongoing cognitive difficulty, there are questions. There is concern. There is intervention. In Bikini Bottom, there is entertainment. His impairment becomes a feature, not a problem to solve. And once something becomes entertaining, it no longer needs help. It just needs to perform. You can hear it in the rhythm of the jokes. Patrick says something that makes no sense. The moment stretches just long enough for you to laugh. Then the story continues. No follow-up, no adjustment. The confusion is left exactly where it was. Not resolved, not acknowledged, just accepted as part of the scenery. This is how normalization works. When something repeats often enough without consequence, it stops raising alarms. Patrick's decline becomes familiar. Familiar becomes comfortable. Comfortable becomes invisible. At some point, you stop asking why he is struggling and start expecting him to. Either Patrick is choosing ignorance, or he is living with an untreated condition that no one wants to address. Both cannot be true at the same time. Choice implies agency. His behavior shows limitation. And limitation without support is not comedy. It is negligence. The tone of the show never changes around him. His mistakes do not slow the world down. They do not inspire patience. They are simply absorbed. That absorption is the problem. When dysfunction is absorbed instead of supported, it teaches everyone watching that confusion is something to laugh through, not care for. You recognize this pattern if you have ever been the friend who was always the joke, the one people loved because you were easy, because you did not make things serious, because your struggles were funny as long as they stayed surface level. Patrick fills that role perfectly. He is harmless, lovable, and never allowed to grow. As a kid watching from the VHS era glow of a Saturday morning, this felt fine. It felt light. As an adult, it feels hollow. The same joke repeated over years starts to feel less like humor and more like erosion. Each laugh takes a little more away and gives nothing back. Patrick does not improve. He does not learn from mistakes. He does not adapt. And the system does not want him to. Growth would disrupt the dynamic. Growth would require patience. Growth would slow things down. So the decline stays right where it is, preserved like everything else. There is a quiet sadness in that preservation. Patrick is allowed to exist, but only in one narrow way. Confused, dependent, entertaining, safe for others, not safe for himself. The discomfort here is not meant to shock you. It is meant to sit with you, to let you notice how easily neglect can disguise itself as humor. How easily laughter can become a permission slip to look away. At some point, ignorance stops being funny and starts being familiar. And once something becomes familiar enough, it stops being questioned, even when it hurts someone like Squidward. You were taught to see Squidward as bitter, but bitterness is not where his story begins. It is where it ends. Squidward starts with dreams, small ones, manageable ones. He wants to create art. He wants to be respected. He wants his inner world to matter. And every time he reaches for that, the environment responds the same way. It dismisses him, it mocks him, then it moves on. The pattern repeats so often it becomes rhythmic. Squidward tries, Squidward is ignored, Squidward is punished for caring. Over time, the trying slows down. The disappointment arrives faster. Eventually, the hope stops showing up at all. This is not a personality flaw, it is adaptation. In psychology, learned helplessness describes what happens when effort consistently leads to failure or ridicule. The mind learns that trying only creates pain, so it stops. Squidward does not stop wanting a better life. He stops believing it is possible. That belief erodes quietly, one humiliation at a time. Watch how his vulnerability is treated. When Squidward expresses pride, it is undermined. When he shows passion, it is exaggerated into a joke. When he admits dissatisfaction, it is framed as whining. The message is consistent. Caring makes you a target. Silence keeps you functional. This is why Squidward sounds the way he does. Flat, sarcastic, tired. Sarcasm becomes a shield when sincerity is punished. Detachment becomes safer than hope. Over time, exhaustion settles in and starts to look like cruelty from the outside. Either Squidward is naturally miserable, or he has learned that optimism only invites disappointment. Both cannot be true at the same time. Misery that develops slowly is not inherent. It is learned. And once it is learned, it is very hard to unlearn. You recognize this if you have ever stayed in a job that drained you, if you have ever lowered your expectations to survive, if you have ever stopped sharing ideas because it felt pointless. Squidward is not angry because he wants to be. He is guarded because the world taught him that openness costs too much. The system benefits from this resignation. A Squidward who no longer hopes does not challenge anything. He shows up. He performs. He goes home. He complains quietly, but never loudly enough to disrupt the loop. Learned helplessness keeps the machine running smoothly. As a kid watching cartoons, Squidward felt like the antagonist. As an adult, he feels like the warning. He is what happens when effort is consistently invalidated, when dreams are introduced only to be dismantled, when vulnerability is met with laughter instead of care. His stagnation mirrors the emotional loop he lives in. Each day looks like the last. Each disappointment feels pre-written. The show circles this reality again and again, not to resolve it, but to maintain it. Squidward stays exactly where he is because change would require acknowledgement. There is no villain here, just a system that does not reward growth. Squidward adapts by shrinking his expectations until they fit the space he is allowed to occupy. That shrinking looks like bitterness. It sounds like sarcasm, but underneath it is exhaustion. He did not become miserable overnight. He adapted. And once adaptation becomes normal, the system looks for ways to make sure everyone else adapts too. In Bikini Bottom, community is not built through care. It is built through contrast. Someone is elevated only because someone else is lowered. Someone feels included because someone else is singled out. This pattern repeats so often it becomes invisible. You stop seeing cruelty. You start seeing tradition. Humiliation functions like social glue. One character slips, fails, misunderstands, or suffers, and the rest of the group gathers around the moment. Laughter follows. Not always cruel laughter, sometimes nervous laughter, sometimes automatic laughter, but laughter all the same. And once the laugh happens, the moment is resolved. Balance is restored. The important part is how fast this happens. There is no pause to ask how the person feels. No space to acknowledge damage. The group response is immediate and unified. Everyone laughs together. That togetherness matters more than the pain that made it possible. This is how social cruelty becomes normalized. When everyone participates, no one feels responsible. The embarrassment belongs to the individual. The comfort belongs to the group. Over time, the lesson sinks in quietly. Suffering is acceptable as long as it entertains others. You see this pattern everywhere in Bikini Bottom. Someone becomes the joke of the episode. Their confusion, their failure, their vulnerability is placed at the center. The group reacts. The laugh arrives. And then the story moves on, lighter than before. The weight has been transferred. Either the community cares about its members or it cares about maintaining harmony at any cost. Both cannot exist at the same time. Harmony built on humiliation is not peace, it is compliance. As a kid, this felt harmless. Everyone laughed. No one stayed hurt for long. As an adult, you start to notice how often the same characters end up in the same role. The butt of the joke, the emotional sacrifice, the one whose discomfort keeps everyone else comfortable. This is why Bikini Bottom feels socially safe and socially empty at the same time. There is always noise, always interaction, but very little empathy. Real empathy would slow things down. It would interrupt the rhythm, and the rhythm must be protected. You recognize this if you have ever laughed along at your own expense to stay included, if you have ever minimized your feelings so the group would not feel awkward, if you have ever been the funny one because being honest felt risky. Social cruelty teaches people how to disappear politely. The show never punishes this behavior. Ridicule rarely has consequences. The group is rewarded with cohesion. The episode resolves. Order returns. That repetition teaches the nervous system that pain is a tool, a necessary one. Over time, the cruelty stops feeling intentional. It becomes automatic. Someone falls, laughter fills the space. The moment passes. No one remembers it long enough to feel guilty. The system does not require malice, it only requires participation. This is what makes the pattern so effective. No villains, no monsters, just ordinary reactions repeated until they feel natural. The group does not need to be cruel, it only needs to stay comfortable. As an adult, revisiting this feels different. You start to see how often the show asks you to side with the crowd instead of the individual. How often the joke asks you to trade empathy for belonging. That trade feels small in the moment, but repeated enough times, it becomes a habit. Bikini Bottom maintains its balance by redistributing pain. One character absorbs it, everyone else exhales. The cycle continues. Pain becomes acceptable when everyone agrees to laugh. And institutions survive by making that agreement feel official, organized, and permanent, which is exactly how boarding school operates. Mrs. Puff is often framed as nervous or incompetent, but her fear is not personal. It is institutional. She is not afraid of SpongeBob as an individual. She is afraid of what would happen if the system admitted it was failing. So the system does what systems do best. It protects itself. Boarding school repeats the same outcome over and over. SpongeBob fails, accidents happen, damage accumulates, and yet nothing changes. The curriculum stays the same. The rules stay the same. The structure remains untouched. Failure is treated as an anomaly instead of a pattern, even though the pattern is obvious. Mrs. Puff reacts with panic, not reflection. Panic moves quickly. Reflection would require stopping, and stopping would require accountability. So the system keeps going, pretending that the next attempt will somehow be different without altering anything that caused the problem in the first place. This is how institutional self-preservation works. The goal is no longer education. The goal is continuity. As long as the school remains open, the system considers itself successful. Students become secondary, outcomes become irrelevant, the process itself becomes a proof. Watch how responsibility is handled. When SpongeBob fails, the blame lands on him. His effort is questioned. His competence is mocked. The institution never asks whether it is equipped to teach him. The system does not adapt to the student. The student is expected to adapt to the system and keep failing quietly. This mirrors real-world education in ways that feel uncomfortable once you notice them. When learning does not happen, the structure rarely changes. The student is told to try harder, pay more attention, take responsibility. The institution remains intact and unexamined. Either boarding school exists to teach students how to drive, or it exists to preserve the appearance of instruction. Both cannot be true at the same time. If teaching were the goal, repeated failure would trigger reform. Instead, repeated failure is normalized. Mrs. Puff's fear is the sound of a system cracking under its own weight while refusing to stop. She knows the outcome. She expects a disaster, and yet she shows up every day to repeat the same process. Not because she believes in it, but because abandoning it would require admitting it never worked. The tone of the show treats this as comedy. Explosions, screaming, reset. But underneath the humor is a familiar rhythm. Institutions rarely admit failure. They endure it. They absorb it. They redirect blame downward and continue forward unchanged. As a kid, this felt absurd. As an adult, it feels recognizable. The class that never adjusted, the training that never prepared you, the evaluation that blamed you for systemic gaps. Mrs. Puff is not a villain. She is a caretaker of a broken structure, doing everything she can to keep it standing. The repetition is the point. SpongeBob fails again. Mrs. Puff panics again. The school survives again. Each loop reinforces the same lesson. The system is more important than the individual experience within it. This is why the environment never evolves. Evolution would imply responsibility. Responsibility would imply fault. and fault would require change. So the system circles itself, using fear as fuel and routine as armor. You are not meant to feel angry here, just aware. The boating school continues not because it succeeds, but because stopping would force a conversation no one wants to have. The lesson never changes, only the excuses do. And once excuses are accepted, the final thing a system removes is memory. Violence in Bikini Bottom is constant, but it is never cumulative. Bodies are crushed, stretched, burned, flattened, and humiliated. And then the next episode begins as if nothing happened. No scars, no hesitation, no behavioral change. Harm arrives, performs, and disappears. That disappearance is not accidental, it is structural. When injury leaves no trace, accountability has nowhere to land. If pain cannot be remembered, it cannot be addressed. And if it cannot be addressed, it does not need justice. Bikini Bottom operates on this rule quietly, consistently, and without resistance. You see it in how characters react. There is no flinch, no caution, no learning. Someone is hurt badly, and moments later they're smiling, laughing, or working like nothing occurred. The system does not allow time for trauma to become real. It resets the body before the mind can register what happened. This creates a strange calm. Nothing ever escalates because nothing ever accumulates. Violence feels light because it is temporary. Temporary pain feels manageable. Manageable pain becomes acceptable. And acceptable pain stops being questioned at all. Either harm matters or it does not. Both cannot exist in the same reality. In Bikini Bottom, harm only matters in the moment it entertains. Once that moment passes, it is erased. The world moves forward untouched. This erasure teaches an important lesson. If nothing sticks, there is no reason to slow down, no reason to change behavior, no reason to protect anyone. Memory is what forces responsibility. Without it, repetition becomes easy. As a kid, this felt safe. No one ever stayed hurt. No one ever stayed sad. As an adult, it feels hollow. Healing requires memory. Growth requires reflection. Justice requires continuity. Bikini Bottom offers none of these, and that absence is disguised as comfort. You recognize this pattern if you have ever been told to move on too quickly, if you have ever been hurt and expected to return to normal immediately, if you have ever felt pressure to forget instead of process. The reset button feels kind until you realize what it prevents. The repetition becomes hypnotic. Pain appears, pain vanishes. Nothing sticks, nothing heals, nothing is remembered. The cadence itself becomes soothing, like a lullaby that promises nothing bad will last, but also promises nothing will improve. This is why the violence never feels urgent. There are no consequences waiting. There is no future shaped by the past. Every moment is isolated, floating, detached from the last, a liminal space where events happen without history. The system depends on this amnesia. Memory would slow things down. Memory would raise questions. Memory would force acknowledgement. So the world forgets on purpose. As you listen now, this realization does not need to alarm you. It can simply settle. The idea that memory is not just a record of pain, but the foundation of resolution. Without memory, there is no repair. Without repair, there is only repetition. Bikini Bottom is peaceful because it forgets. It is calm because nothing carries over. It is safe because nothing is allowed to matter for long. And that calm can feel comforting late at night when you are tired and do not want to hold on to anything heavy. The world promises that whatever happened will be gone soon, that nothing will follow you, that nothing needs to be resolved. But there is a cost to that promise. If nothing is remembered, nothing is resolved. And that kind of forgetting creates a perfect environment for someone like Mr. Krabs to thrive. Mr. Krabs is often described as greedy, but greed is too obvious. What he actually practices is something quieter. He understands loyalty, and more importantly, he understands how to monetize it. He does not demand devotion outright. He cultivates it, slowly, strategically, with just enough warmth to keep it alive. Watch how his affection appears. It arrives after productivity. Praise follows profit. A smile comes after a long shift, not before it. This is not random. It is conditioning. SpongeBob learns that approval is earned through output, not through being human. Care becomes a reward, not a baseline. Mr. Krabs knows when to soften his voice. He knows when to call SpongeBob a good worker, a loyal employee, a trusted part of the family. Those words land harder because they are rare. Scarcity makes them valuable. And once something feels valuable, you work harder to keep it. This is how transactional kindness works. It never feels cruel in the moment. It feels earned, SpongeBob believes he is chosen, special, seen, but only when he performs correctly. The moment productivity drops, the warmth disappears, not dramatically, quietly, as if it was never guaranteed in the first place. Either Mr. Krabs cares about SpongeBob as a person or he cares about SpongeBob as a resource. Both cannot exist at the same time. Care that vanishes under pressure was never care. It was leverage. The system does not need threats to function. SpongeBob polices himself. He overworks willingly. He anticipates needs. He apologizes for things that are not his fault. This is loyalty extracted through affection, not fear, and that makes it feel cleaner, kinder, more acceptable. You recognize this if you have ever worked somewhere that called itself a family. If you have ever felt proud of staying late because it meant you were trusted. If you have ever confused approval with safety. Mr. Krabs does not invent this behavior, he perfects it. Notice how rarely SpongeBob is praised for rest, for boundaries, for saying no. Those behaviors do not produce profit. They do not reinforce the system, so they are ignored. Instead, enthusiasm is rewarded. Exhaustion is celebrated. Sacrifice is reframed as passion. The charm is essential. A cruel boss would create resistance. A funny one creates compliance. Mr. Krabs laughs, jokes, and occasionally shows vulnerability. Just enough to remind SpongeBob that there is a person there. Just not enough to interrupt the flow of labor. This repetition becomes soothing. Work hard, receive praise. Feel valued, repeat. The loop feels stable, predictable, safe, even as it drains you, especially as it drains you, because the system has taught you that depletion is proof of dedication. As a child, this dynamic feels invisible. As an adult, it feels uncomfortably familiar. The performance reviews that mix compliments with higher expectations, the bonuses that replace boundaries, the casual kindness that disappears when numbers drop. Mr. Krabs never has to raise his voice. He never has to explain himself. The system speaks for him. SpongeBob already knows the rules. Loyalty first, self later. And if self disappears entirely, the machine runs even smoother. There is no villain monologue here, no dramatic reveal, just a pattern repeating calmly. Affection given, affection withdrawn, output increases, the business thrives, the worker smiles. When kindness has a price, it is not kindness. And when visibility has a price, it turns identity into a trap, which is exactly where Plankton lives. Plankton is framed as the villain, but villainy suggests choice. What Plankton shows instead is compulsion. He does not scheme because he enjoys it. He schemes because without the scheme, there is nothing left for him to be. Opposition is not his strategy, it is his identity. Every plan follows the same shape. He fails, he resets, he tries again. Their repetition is not about hope, it is about maintenance. As long as he is trying to steal the formula, he exists in relation to something larger than himself. The moment he stops, the world forgets him. This is the illusion of the underdog. It feels noble, persistent, admirable, but look closer and the pattern becomes smaller and smaller. Plankton does not imagine a life beyond the conflict. He does not picture peace. He does not picture success without domination. His entire sense of self is built around resistance. Either Plankton is choosing the struggle freely, or he has learned that being unseen is worse than being hated. Both cannot be true at the same time. Freedom does not require constant proof of existence. Survival does. The show treats his obsession as humor, but obsession is rarely funny when you slow it down. His failures are predictable. His anger is ritualistic. His hope is compulsive. Without the conflict, there is no narrative space for him. Without the narrative space, he disappears. You recognize this pattern if you have ever defined yourself through opposition. If you have ever felt more comfortable fighting than resting. If you have ever kept chasing something, not because it fulfilled you, but because stopping felt like erasure. Plankton keeps going because going is the only way he knows how to stay visible. The system reinforces this. His failure is mocked, but his persistence is expected. The world needs him to keep trying. Not so he can win, but so the balance stays intact. A Plankton who succeeds would disrupt the order. A Plankton who gives up would fade out. This creates a narrow corridor of identity. Villain or nothing. Try or vanish. There is no third option. And when there are only two choices, neither of them is freedom. The repetition becomes calming in a strange way. You know what Plankton will do. You know how it will end. There is comfort in that predictability. Even his failure feels stable. The loop protects the system by keeping him small and busy. As an adult, this starts to feel familiar. The hustle that never leads anywhere. The rivalry that defines you more than your own values. The constant effort to stay relevant. Plankton is not chasing success. He is chasing acknowledgement. Notice how rarely anyone asks what Plankton wants beyond winning. The question is never raised because the answer would break the loop. If he wanted something else, the story would have to slow down, so he keeps wanting the same thing forever. This is not evil, it is conditioning. When attention only arrives through conflict, conflict becomes home. Plankton does not know who he is without resistance, so he never finds out. The underdog story feels inspiring until you realize it never ends. There is no resolution, only repetition, only effort without progress, only movement without arrival. Plankton keeps trying because trying keeps him visible. And in a system that forgets everything else, being seen feels like survival. If he stops trying, he stops being seen. And some people solve that problem by never needing anyone at all, which is how Sandy Cheeks survives. Sandy is introduced as capable, intelligent, and endlessly prepared. She builds solutions. She fixes problems. She adapts faster than anyone else in Bikini Bottom. On the surface, this looks like strength. And it is. But strength used, this consistently, starts to resemble something else. It starts to resemble distance. Watch how Sandy handles difficulty. She does not ask for help. She does not wait. She does not pause to check in emotionally. She acts quickly, efficiently, alone. The pattern repeats so often it feels natural. Independence becomes her default setting, not a choice she revisits. The environment rewards this. Sandy's confidence keeps the system running smoothly. Problems disappear faster when she handles them herself. No one has to slow down. No one has to accommodate vulnerability. The world continues without interruption. That efficiency is praised quietly and repeatedly. But there is a cost to never needing help. Vulnerability gets postponed. Emotional needs get deferred. Connection becomes optional. Sandy does not avoid others out of arrogance. She avoids reliance because reliance introduces risk. Risk introduces disappointment. Solving everything yourself feels safer. Either Sandy is independent because she prefers solitude, or she has learned that competence is the price of belonging. Both cannot be true at the same time. Preference implies freedom. Conditioning implies adaptation. You see this in how rarely anyone asks Sandy how she is doing. They ask what she can fix, what she can build, what she can handle. Her value is tied to output, not presence. Over time, that teaches a simple lesson. Be useful or be invisible. This resonates if you have ever been the reliable one, the strong one, the person everyone turns to in a crisis but no one checks on afterward. High-functioning isolation looks impressive from the outside. From the inside, it feels quiet, empty, efficient, but lonely. Sandy's world inside the dome mirrors this perfectly. It is controlled, self-sustaining, protected. Everything she needs is there. Everything except ease. Everything except shared weight. The dome keeps her alive, but it also keeps her separate. The repetition is gentle here. Sandy solves. Sandy succeeds. Sandy moves on. Again and again. The rhythm is calming, almost reassuring. Nothing lingers. Nothing overwhelms. But nothing connects deeply either. The pace stays manageable by keeping emotion at arm's length. As a kid, Sandy felt aspirational, smart, strong, unstoppable. As an adult, she feels familiar in a different way. The productivity, the self-reliance, the quiet exhaustion of always being capable. The system does not ask Sandy to slow down. It does not ask her to rest. It assumes she will handle it. And she does, every time. That assumption becomes a trap. When you always can, you are rarely allowed not to. This is how isolation hides inside competence. The stronger you appear, the fewer people think to check in, the less you struggle visibly, the less support arrives. Over time, independence becomes not just a skill, but a boundary that keeps others out. There is no crisis here, no breakdown, just a steady drift into solitude that feels productive enough to ignore. Sandy is not unhappy. She is just alone, in ways that never become urgent. You are not meant to judge this. Just notice it. Strength is not the same as connection. Capability is not the same as care. And solving everything yourself does not mean you do not need anyone. Independence becomes lonely when no one asks how you're doing. And when no one is checking in, urgency becomes the next best substitute for connection. Bikini Bottom is always on the edge of a crisis. Something is exploding, something is flooding, something is going wrong right now. The word right now matters. Emergencies arrive loudly and leave quickly, creating a rhythm that never fully stops. Panic shows up, takes control of the moment, and then disappears before anyone can ask what caused it. This is not chaos, it is routine chaos. The same pattern repeated until it feels familiar. A problem appears. Everyone reacts, the problem resolves, everything resets. No lessons linger, no structures change. The system stays intact. When emergencies happen constantly, they stop being meaningful. Urgency becomes background noise. You move from one problem to the next without ever deciding which ones matter. The nervous system stays activated, but the mind never settles long enough to reflect. This is how control works without force. If everyone is always responding, no one is ever deciding. Panic keeps people busy. Busy people do not question systems, they just react. Either emergencies are rare and important, or they are frequent and distracting. Both cannot exist at the same time. In Bikini Bottom, urgency is everywhere, which means importance is nowhere. You see this in how quickly crises resolve. A disaster unfolds. The stakes feel high. Then the episode ends and everything is fine again. The next emergency arrives with the same intensity, demanding the same attention. Nothing accumulates, nothing improves, motion replaces progress. This mirrors how modern media works. Alerts, headlines, breaking news, everything framed as critical, everything demanding immediate attention. When everything is urgent, your ability to prioritize shuts down. You stay engaged, but not grounded. As a kid, this felt exciting. High energy, constant motion. As an adult, it feels exhausting. The body recognizes the pattern before the mind does. Always reacting, never arriving. Bikini Bottom uses emergencies to maintain engagement. The crisis keeps characters moving in predictable ways. There is no time to ask deeper questions, no space to slow down. Panic becomes the organizing principle. The repetition is calming in a strange way. You know how it will go. The emergency will not last. The world will survive. That predictability lowers fear, even as it keeps you locked in the loop. You stay alert without ever feeling resolved. This is why the show feels so easy to fall asleep to now. The crises sound big, but they are harmless. Nothing will carry over. Nothing will demand follow-up. Your brain can let go because it knows nothing is truly at stake. But there is a cost to that comfort. When urgency is constant, meaning disappears. You stop asking why things happen. You only focus on what needs attention next. The system remains untouched. You are not meant to feel alarmed by this. Just quietly aware. Crisis can be real. It can also be manufactured. And when it is manufactured often enough, it becomes a tool. Bikini Bottom stays stable by never slowing down. Emergencies keep everyone busy. Busy keeps everyone compliant. The loop continues without resistance. When everything is urgent, nothing is important. And when importance disappears, a world is left with only one question it never answers out loud. Bikini Bottom survives because it does not grow. That is not a metaphor. It is a rule. Every system you have just seen depends on this one condition staying intact. Jobs stay the same. Roles stay the same. Personalities stay the same. The moment something threatens to evolve, the world gently pushes it back into place. This creates the central logic trap of Bikini Bottom. Either the world remains stable or it allows growth. Both cannot exist together. Stability requires repetition. Growth requires disruption. Bikini Bottom chooses repetition every time. You see this in how lessons never stick. Characters experience moments that should change them. Breakdowns, revelations, new escapes. And then everything resets. The system absorbs the shock and returns to normal. Not because it is resilient, but because it is rigid. A rigid system feels calm, predictable, safe. You always know what comes next. That predictability lowers anxiety. It also removes possibility. Nothing truly new can survive here. Growth would fracture the loop. This is why attempts at change always fail softly. Dreams dissolve, conflicts fade, breakthroughs are forgotten. The world does not punish growth aggressively. It simply refuses to remember it. And forgetting is gentler than rejection. Either Bikini Bottom is stable because it is healthy, or it is stable because it cannot tolerate change. Both cannot be true at the same time. Health adapts, stagnation preserves. This is where the tone becomes quieter. There is no villain enforcing this rule, no authority announcing it. The system enforces itself through comfort, through familiarity, through the promise that nothing will ever ask too much of you. If you are still awake, listening to this deep into the timeline, know that it's okay. Sleep will come. You do not have to solve anything right now. Just let the story carry you. Bikini Bottom feels soothing because it removes choice. You do not have to decide who to become here. You already know. Everyone already knows. The loop holds you in place, so you do not have to imagine something else. As an adult, this feels familiar in an uncomfortable way. The routines that keep life manageable, the habits that prevent risk, the stability that slowly turns into stagnation. It is easier to stay the same than to face what change would cost. The show never answers the ultimatum. It does not need to. The answer is built into the structure. The world survives because it never moves forward. It stays recognizable, watchable, repeatable. This is why it works so well as sleep content. Nothing demands resolution. Nothing carries weight into tomorrow. The system promises you that whatever you notice tonight will not follow you into the next episode or the next day. You are allowed to rest inside that promise just for now, just long enough to let your thoughts slow down. The logic trap does not need to be solved. It only needs to be felt. Bikini Bottom exists in a careful balance, stable enough to be comforting, static enough to be preserved. Growth waits outside the borders of the frame. A world that grows would stop being this one. And SpongeBob understands that instinctively, which is why he never looks very far ahead. SpongeBob does not imagine a future, not in the way adults are taught to. There is no 5-year plan, no long-term goal, no version of himself that lives somewhere beyond tomorrow morning. When he talks about happiness, it is always immediate. The next shift, the next task, the next small moment of approval. Today is enough. And because today is enough, tomorrow never needs to be different. This is not ignorance, it is adaptation. In a world that resets constantly, future thinking becomes unnecessary. Why plan for growth when nothing carries over? Why imagine change when the system quietly erases it? SpongeBob learns this early, and he learns it well. Watch how his routines repeat. Wake up, get ready, go to work, perform with enthusiasm, return home, rest just enough to do it again. The rhythm is soothing, predictable, circular. Tomorrow looks exactly like today, and today already works. That sameness becomes comforting instead of concerning. Either SpongeBob lacks ambition, or he has learned that ambition has nowhere to go. Both cannot be true at the same time. Ambition requires a future that remembers effort. Bikini Bottom does not remember. So SpongeBob stops projecting himself forward and collapses his identity into the present moment. This is why his optimism never turns into longing. He does not wish for more. He wishes for repetition, consistency, another chance to do the same thing well. That desire feels pure, but it is also limiting. Without a future, identity stops expanding. It stabilizes instead. As a kid, this felt wholesome. Live in the moment, enjoy the little things. As an adult, it feels familiar in a different way. The feeling of being stuck without feeling panicked about it, the quiet agreement to keep things manageable rather than meaningful. You recognize this if you have ever told yourself that you are fine right where you are, even when something deeper feels paused. If you have ever delayed dreaming because dreaming felt exhausting, SpongeBob does not resist the future. He simply never reaches for it. The show frames this as contentment, and in many ways it is. There is peace in not striving. There is relief in not measuring progress. But there is also a subtle erosion. When tomorrow is always identical, identity stops evolving. It repeats itself until it feels complete. This repetition is gentle. It does not hurt. That is why it works. SpongeBob is not distressed by his lack of future. He is soothed by it. The absence of ambition removes pressure. No expectations, no deadlines, no fear of falling behind. The system rewards this mindset. A SpongeBob who dreams too far ahead might question things, might grow dissatisfied, might want something else, so the system encourages presence without projection. Enjoy now, repeat later. This can feel reassuring late at night. The idea that it is okay not to know what comes next, that it is okay to stay where you are. SpongeBob offers a version of peace that does not demand movement. But that peace comes with stillness, and stillness, when repeated forever, becomes stasis. The future never arrives because it is never invited. You are not meant to feel sad about this, just calm. The recognition that sometimes the absence of a future is not a failure, it is a coping strategy. SpongeBob is not lost. He is settled into a present that never asks him to change. A future never arrives when today is always enough. And memory would threaten that balance, which is why Bikini Bottom treats remembering as optional. Forgetting in this world is not a flaw, it is a feature. Pain does not get stored, embarrassment does not accumulate, trauma does not echo forward. The system gently deletes what would otherwise slow everything down. Memory would require reflection, reflection would require change. So memory is kept light, temporary, disposable. You see this in how quickly characters move on. Something upsetting happens and it is gone almost immediately. Not healed, not resolved, gone. The feeling does not linger long enough to ask for care. It simply fades, replaced by the next moment. That fading is comforting. It promises relief without effort. This is not forgetfulness as carelessness, it is forgetfulness as protection. In a world that never changes, holding on to pain would be unbearable. If nothing improves, remembering would only reopen the same wound again and again. So the system chooses erasure instead. Either memory is valuable or stability is. Both cannot be prioritized at the same time. Memory carries consequences. Stability requires reset. Bikini Bottom chooses reset every time. As a kid, this felt kind. Nothing bad ever stayed bad. As an adult, it feels familiar in a quieter way. The urge to push thoughts away. The habit of moving on quickly. The relief of not revisiting what hurts. Forgetting becomes a coping strategy when processing feels too heavy. Notice how rarely characters reference the past in any meaningful way. Yesterday does not inform today. Last week does not shape tomorrow. Every moment floats independently, unburdened by what came before. This makes the world feel light, but also flat. Nothing has depth if nothing has history. The repetition here is soothing. Pain appears, pain disappears, again and again. The rhythm teaches the nervous system that discomfort is temporary, even if the cause never changes. That lesson feels calming when you're tired, when you do not have the energy to carry anything else. But forgetting comes with a cost. Memory is how patterns are recognized. Memory is how boundaries form. Memory is how harm is named. Without it, everything feels manageable, but nothing improves. You recognize this if you have ever avoided thinking about something because it felt easier than dealing with it. If you have ever told yourself it was fine just to keep moving, memory would slow you down. Forgetting lets you function. Bikini Bottom depends on this kind of functioning. Characters do not spiral, they do not grieve. They do not sit with loss, they reset. The system remains smooth because nothing sticks to it. Emotional friction is minimized. This is why the world feels so easy to revisit late at night. Nothing demands emotional labor. Nothing asks you to remember too much. You can drift through it without carrying weight forward. The voice of the show never asks you to hold on to anything. It invites you to laugh, then let go. Laugh, then let go. The cycle repeats until letting go feels automatic. This is not a condemnation. It is an observation. Forgetting is not always denial. Sometimes it is survival, especially in systems where remembering would not change the outcome. But survival and growth are not the same thing. Growth requires memory. Growth requires discomfort that stays long enough to teach something. Bikini Bottom chooses comfort instead. The calm you feel here is real. The relief is real, but it is built on absence, on deletion, on a world that stays gentle by refusing to remember. Remembering would require change. And without memory, relationships are allowed to continue without ever being repaired. Friendship in Bikini Bottom is constant. It never ends. Arguments happen, betrayals happen, cruelty happens. And then quietly, everything resumes. Not because anything was addressed, but because nothing was examined closely enough to break. Conflicts dissolve without apology. Hurt feelings evaporate without conversation. The next scene begins and everyone is still friends. The continuity is comforting. The lack of repair is easy to miss. Connection remains intact not because it is strong, but because it is never stressed long enough to reveal its limits. This creates a specific kind of relationship, familiar, persistent, and shallow. Bonds exist through repetition, not trust, through proximity, not understanding. People stay connected because they never slow down enough to ask whether they should. You see this most clearly in how rarely anyone says sorry. When harm occurs, it is brushed past, laughed through, or forgotten entirely. Accountability would require memory. Memory would require discomfort. So the system skips both and moves on. Either these friendships are resilient or they are untested. Both cannot be true at the same time. Resilience comes from repair. From rupture, followed by care, untested bonds survive by never facing strain. This can feel soothing. No confrontations, no heavy talks, no emotional labor. Everything stays light enough to carry. The cost is depth, but the benefit is stability. Nobody risks losing anyone because nobody asked for more than surface level harmony. As a kid, This felt ideal. Friends forever, no matter what. As an adult, it starts to feel familiar in a quieter way. The group chats that never address tension, the friendships that survive because no one brings up what hurt them, the peace that exists because everyone agrees not to look too closely. The repetition matters here. Conflict appears, conflict vanishes, connection resumes, again and again. The rhythm teaches the nervous system that closeness does not require repair, that relationships can function indefinitely as long as no one insists on honesty. This is not cruelty, it is avoidance. Avoidance feels gentle, it avoids escalation, it avoids loss, it avoids the risk of being misunderstood. And over time, it becomes a pattern that feels safe. But safety without accountability creates fragility. Bonds that are never examined are never strengthened. They remain exactly as deep as they started. That depth might be enough for a while. Eventually, it begins to feel hollow. You recognize this if you have ever kept the peace by staying quiet. If you have ever let something go, not because it healed, but because you did not want to disturb the connection. Friendship without accountability asks you to trade honesty for continuity. Bikini Bottom rewards this trade. Relationships remain stable. Episodes end without fallout. The system stays smooth. No one leaves. No one grows closer either. The calm tone of the show reinforces this. Nothing feels urgent. Nothing demands resolution. You are not asked to choose sides. You are asked to keep watching, keep smiling, keep going. This is why the friendships feel eternal and incomplete at the same time. They do not fracture, but they also do not deepen. They hover in place, comfortable, familiar, unchanged. Late at night, this can feel reassuring. The idea that relationships can persist without effort, without difficult conversations, without the risk of rupture, it lets the mind rest. But rest built on avoidance has limits. Without examination, patterns repeat. Without repair, closeness plateaus. The connection stays intact, but it never evolves. Bikini Bottom shows a world where friendship survives everything by confronting nothing, where bonds last forever because they are never asked to carry weight. Nothing breaks when nothing is examined. And that is where Bikini Bottom quietly asks its final question without ever demanding an answer. At some point, you are offered a choice even if no one says it out loud. You can stay comfortable, or you can become aware. You can keep resting inside the familiar rhythm, or you can start noticing what the rhythm is doing. Both cannot happen at the same time. Awareness changes things. It slows you down. It introduces friction. The moment you see a pattern clearly, you can no longer pretend it is harmless. Comfort depends on not seeing too much. It depends on familiarity staying soft and unquestioned. Bikini Bottom understands this instinctively. The world is designed to be noticed just enough to feel clever, but never enough to feel disruptive. You are allowed insight as long as it does not linger. You are allowed curiosity as long as it dissolves before it asks for change. Either you remain aware and restless, or you remain comfortable and still. Awareness wakes you up. Comfort lets you sleep. The system does not tell you which one to choose. It simply rewards one more than the other. You feel this tension as you watch. Part of you notices the dysfunction, the repetition, the quiet sadness under the jokes. Another part of you wants to let it go, to sink back into the sound of familiar voices, to rest. That pull is not accidental. It is the design working as intended. The voice stays calm here because urgency would break the spell. There is no alarm to sound, no truth to expose dramatically, just a gentle loop. See a little, feel a little, then let it fade, over and over again. Eater. This mirrors real life more than it seems. The moments when you sense something is wrong, but decide not to dig. The times when understanding feels heavy and comfort feels necessary. You are not weak for choosing rest, you are human. Awareness carries responsibility. Once you see something clearly, you are asked to respond. Comfort asks nothing from you. It wraps around you and says you can stay exactly where you are. That promise feels especially kind when you are tired. Bikini Bottom offers that kindness constantly. It does not punish you for noticing. It simply makes noticing unnecessary. Everything continues whether you question it or not. The world will reset. The laughter will return. Nothing will follow you into tomorrow. This is why the dilemma never resolves. The show does not argue for comfort or awareness. It just places them side by side and lets you drift between them. One moment you see clearly, the next moment you relax. Late at night, this balance feels intentional. You can hold the thought briefly, then set it down. You do not have to carry it forward. You do not have to decide what it means. The system will take it from you gently. You are allowed to notice without acting, to understand without changing anything, to let insight exist briefly and then fade into the background noise of familiarity. That permission is what makes rest possible. The mind grows tired of holding contradictions. Eventually, it chooses the lighter one, not because it is right, but because it is easier to hold while falling asleep. Bikini Bottom does not force you to choose. It simply waits. Awareness flickers. Comfort settles. The rhythm continues. And you are free to let the question go. Understanding wakes you up. Comfort lets you sleep. And Bikini Bottom chooses comfort so consistently that nothing ever has to change. Nothing changes here because nothing needs to. That is not a failure of the system. It is the system working exactly as intended. Progress would introduce uncertainty. Growth would introduce discomfort. Change would require remembering what came before and imagining something after. Bikini Bottom avoids all of that by staying the same. The sameness is not empty. It is functional. Streets look familiar. Voices sound the same. Roles remain clearly defined. When everything stays in place, the nervous system relaxes. You know what to expect. You know how things will end. That predictability becomes a kind of shelter. Stagnation is often framed as something to escape, but in this world it is a solution. When no one moves forward, no one falls behind. When tomorrow looks like today, there is no pressure to become more than you already are. The absence of progress removes comparison. It removes urgency. It removes the fear of missing out. Either stagnation is a problem or it is a form of stability. Both cannot be true at the same time. In Bikini Bottom, stability wins. The world remains recognizable, watchable, and easy to return to. That return is the goal. You feel this when you revisit the show late at night. The repetition is calming. You do not have to catch up. You do not have to remember plot lines. Nothing has advanced without you. The world waited. This mirrors a quiet desire many adults carry, the wish for life to pause, for expectations to soften, for the sense that it is okay to stay where you are for a while. Bikini Bottom offers that permission without saying it out loud. The routines are gentle. Work repeats. Friendships resume. Conflicts dissolve. The cycle never asks for improvement. It only asks for participation. Show up. Smile. Repeat. The system rewards consistency, not ambition. As a kid, this felt like safety. As an adult, it feels like relief. The pressure to optimize, to grow, to constantly become something else fades here. There is no ladder to climb, no timeline to chase, just the present, looping comfortably. The repetition becomes softer as it continues. Each pass feels less analytical and more soothing. The idea circles back on itself slowly. Nothing changes, nothing needs to. Everything stays manageable because it stays familiar. This is why the show never demands transformation arcs. Characters do not evolve into new versions of themselves. They remain exactly who they are. That consistency makes them easy to recognize, easy to return to, easy to rest with. You are not meant to judge this, you are meant to settle into it. The system does not ask you to agree with it, it simply invites you to stay, to let the rhythm carry you without resistance. Change can be meaningful. Growth can be healthy, but they require energy. They require discomfort. They require effort. Bikini Bottom offers an alternative, a world where effort is optional and expectations are low. Late at night, this feels kind. The idea that it is okay to stop pushing, to stop improving, to stop becoming. Just for now. Just long enough to breathe. The calm comes from knowing that nothing will surprise you. The loop will hold, the world will reset. Tomorrow will look like today, and today is already enough. Staying the same is easier than becoming something else. And over time, Bikini Bottom turns that sameness into something softer, something that feels almost like being tucked in. This world knows how to soothe itself. Routines repeat the way bedtime rituals do. The same streets, the same sounds, the same familiar problems that never last long enough to hurt. Predictability becomes a blanket. Nothing unexpected slips through. Nothing sharp stays uncovered. You can feel it in the pacing. Episodes move without urgency now. The chaos no longer feels loud. It feels scheduled. Like a noise machine that you have heard so many times, your body no longer reacts. The rhythm tells you everything you need to know. Nothing here will ask too much of you. Bikini Bottom does not challenge you to stay alert. It invites you to relax. The repetition reassures you that the world will hold itself together without your effort. You do not need to intervene. You do not need to solve anything. The system has already decided how things go. This is how environments become self-soothing. They remove uncertainty. They reduce variation. They repeat familiar patterns until the nervous system stops scanning for danger. Over time, the body learns that it's safe to let go here. As a kid, this felt like comfort without explanation. As an adult, it feels intentional. The way everything resets gently, the way nothing carries emotional weight forward, the way each moment stands alone, uncomplicated by history or consequence. Either a world surprises you or it protects you from surprise. Both cannot exist at the same time. Bikini Bottom chooses protection. It smooths edges. It lowers stakes. It wraps everything in familiarity. This is why the show feels different late at night. The colors soften, the voices blend into the background. The patterns repeat just enough to keep your attention without demanding it. The world becomes background comfort rather than narrative focus. You recognize this feeling if you have ever fallen asleep to something you have already seen. The brain relaxes because it knows what is coming. There is no anticipation, no tension, just gentle continuation. Bikini Bottom offers that continuation endlessly. The same jokes, the same misunderstandings, the same resolutions that never change anything. It is not meant to surprise you anymore. It is meant to carry you. The analysis fades here on purpose. The details matter less than the feeling. A world that knows exactly how it works does not need explanation. It simply repeats itself until repetition becomes reassurance. This is how the environment tucks itself in. It lowers the lights by keeping everything familiar. It quiets the mind by refusing to escalate. It promises that nothing will demand your full attention. You are allowed to drift here. The world will keep going whether you watch closely or not. That knowledge is comforting. It means you can step back without missing anything important. Predictability does not excite, it calms, it slows breathing, it loosens the grip of thought. Bikini Bottom becomes less of a story and more of a soundscape, familiar enough to trust, simple enough to release into. This is not emptiness, it is intentional softness, a place designed to reduce effort, to reduce worry, to reduce the need to stay awake. The longer you stay, the more the world does the work for you. It holds itself together so you do not have to. The repetition hums quietly in the background, steady and unchanging. A predictable world does not surprise you, but it lets you rest. And the reason it can do that is because you are here, listening, returning, participating. You are not outside this loop. You are part of it. Not in a way that asks for blame or guilt or responsibility, just in a quiet, ordinary way. Watching is participation. Returning is consent. And consent in this context simply means familiarity. You did not come back because you were curious. You came back because it felt known. Because your body recognized the rhythm before your mind caught up. The voices, the pacing, the patterns. They are already stored somewhere in you, like a memory that does not require effort to access. This is how loops sustain themselves, not through force, through comfort. The system does not need to convince you. It only needs to feel familiar enough that you do not question why you returned. You have seen this before. Maybe not consciously, maybe not recently, but your nervous system remembers. It remembers the VHS glow, the background cartoons playing while you half slept on the couch, the feeling of safety that came from knowing nothing bad would linger. So when you press play again, you are not making a decision. You are responding to habit. Habit feels neutral, automatic, gentle. There's no wrongdoing in that. Habit is how tired minds protect themselves. Either you are actively choosing this world or this world is choosing you through familiarity. Both can feel true at the same time. And that overlap is where comfort lives. The show does not demand your full attention. It does not punish distraction. You can drift in and out without consequence. The loop will be there when you come back. That reliability builds trust, and trust makes rest possible. This is why the system includes you without acknowledging you. You are not addressed directly. You are not asked to engage. You are simply allowed to be present. Presence without demand is rare. It feels kind. You recognize this pattern if you have ever rewatched something you did not fully enjoy, but still found calming. The enjoyment is not the point anymore. The familiarity is. Knowing how it feels is more important than knowing what happens. Bikini Bottom continues because people like you return to it. Not because it is perfect, not because it is deep, but because it does not ask for growth, attention, or effort. It meets you where you are, exactly as you are. There is no accusation here, only observation. Systems persist when they are easy to re-enter, when they forgive absence, when they feel the same no matter how long you have been gone. Late at night, that forgiveness matters. You do not need to catch up. You do not need to remember details. The world does not move forward without you, it waits. By listening now, you complete the loop. The show resets. The analysis softens, the rhythm holds. You do not need to do anything else. Your presence is enough to keep it going. This realization does not need to wake you up. It can simply settle. Watching is participation. Participation is habit. Habit is comfort. You came back because it felt familiar. And familiarity is where this story began, long before it knew what it was doing to you. Think back to the colors first. Bright, soft, impossible blues and pinks that never asked to be realistic. Colors designed not to describe a place, but to signal safety. Nothing sharp, nothing threatening, just enough movement to keep your eyes open while your guard stayed down. That has not changed. Think about the laughter. High-pitched, constant, reliable. It arrived on schedule every time something felt strange or uncomfortable. The laughter told you when to relax. It told you when the moment was over. It told you that whatever just happened did not matter anymore. That has not changed either. Think about how safe it all felt. Not because nothing bad happened, but because nothing bad stayed. The world absorbed everything and returned to normal, over and over again. That safety was real. It still is. It just means something different now. At the beginning, innocence felt natural. You did not question it at it. You accepted the tone, the rhythm, the logic of the world without resistance. As a child, that was not ignorance. It was trust. Trust in a world that promised nothing would ask too much of you. Now, the same world feels heavier, but also calmer. You can see the patterns. You can name them. You can recognize the systems underneath the jokes, but the surface remains the same. The colors did not darken. The voices did not change. The rhythm did not break. This is where recognition replaces analysis. You do not need to dissect anything further. You have already seen what there is to see. The meaning does not need to be pushed. It can rest. The world you are listening to now is the same one you grew up with. It just carries a different weight because you do. The innocence did not disappear. It aged alongside you. It adapted. It learned how to hold your attention while letting your mind rest. Either this world was always simple, or it learned how to feel simple while containing complexity. Both can feel true at the same time. That overlap is where comfort lives now. Late at night, this familiarity wraps around you differently. Not as distraction, but as recognition. You are not discovering something new. You are revisiting something you already know from a place that understands it better. The laughter no longer instructs you. It accompanies you. The colors no longer excite you. They soften the edges of thought. The safety no longer comes from ignorance. It comes from knowing that nothing here will demand more than you can give. This is why the loop feels complete. The beginning and the ending touch without tension. The same elements return, carrying less urgency and more calm. The world stays the same. You are the one who changed. Nothing here needs to be solved. Nothing needs to be corrected. The recognition is enough. You can let the meaning pass through without holding onto it. The system continues. The characters repeat. The rhythm hums quietly in the background. And you are allowed to simply be here, noticing without effort, resting without resistance. This is not the loss of innocence, it is its return. Reframed, softer, quieter, more honest. Nothing changed. Only how you see it. And now that seeing has done its work, it does not need to continue. There is nothing left to figure out. No pattern left unfinished. No conclusion waiting for you to reach it. The world does not require your understanding anymore. It never truly did. Bikini Bottom keeps moving whether you analyze it or not, whether you notice it or let it blur into the background. This is where the thinking can slow down. The questions can loosen their grip. The ideas you are holding can be set down gently, one by one, without needing to be resolved. The system will carry itself forward. It always has. You do not need to stay alert. You do not need to stay curious. The rhythm will continue without effort from you. The voices will repeat. The patterns will loop. The world will remain familiar and unchanged, holding itself together quietly. This is the part where conclusions dissolve, where meaning becomes optional, where the mind stops scanning for significance and starts responding only to sound, to cadence, to repetition. Nothing here will ask you to remember it later. Bikini Bottom does not need you to participate anymore. It does not need observation or insight. It simply exists, and you are allowed to exist alongside it without doing anything else. The repetition becomes softer now. The same ideas pass by again, but slower, lighter, less defined. Colors fade into tone. Laughter fades into rhythm. Meaning fades into familiarity. Everything becomes background. You can let the day fall away. You can let the analysis loosen. The world will still be here when you are not paying attention to it. That knowledge is comforting. It means you can rest without missing anything important. Breathing slows when there is nothing to anticipate. The nervous system relaxes when nothing is demanded. Bikini Bottom offers that absence of demand freely. It does not ask for growth. It does not ask for decisions. It does not ask you to become anything. This is where the loop does not need to close again. It simply continues on its own, gently, predictably, without involving you. You can drift away from it without consequence. The thoughts that felt interesting a moment ago can soften now. They do not need to stay sharp. They can blur at the edges. They can repeat without clarity. They can fade into the same familiar hum that carried you here. Nothing bad will happen if you stop listening closely. Nothing will be lost if you let go. The world will reset. It always does. This is not the end of anything. It is just a pause long enough to rest. The kind of pause that does not require attention. The kind that feels safe because it has happened before. You do not need to hold on to the ideas anymore. You do not need to remember them. They can dissolve into the background like everything else in this world. That is how it is designed. And now, you do not have to think about it anymore. If you enjoyed our video, subscribe to SpongeBob Sleep Stories for more videos like these.